I signed it to pay for my father's mistakes. 6 months, that was all it was supposed to be. It wasn't a wedding, it was an agreement sealed with ink and silence. He didn't look at me when we said our vows. His eyes stayed on the document, not on me. To him, I wasn't a bride, I was a name on paper, a necessity to make a family deal look legitimate in the eyes of the board. I remember that day too clearly. The courthouse smelled of rain and old wood, the kind of air that carried the scent of endings. My white dress wasn't new, it was borrowed from a cousin. The man beside me, Adrian Vale, billionaire, heir to a business empire, stood like a statue carved from glass, sharp, cold, untouchable. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't smile. When the clerk asked him to repeat his vows, he simply said, yes, as though it were a line in a contract, not a promise. The ink hadn't even dried when he turned away and said, the car is waiting. That was the first time I realized, love wasn't required here. Only compliance. And yet, even then, something inside me whispered, 6 months is a long time to pretend you don't feel anything. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss the upcoming stories. For the next video, what kind of story do you love the most? Tell me in the comments. The penthouse he brought me to didn't look like a home. It looked like an exhibit, white marble floors, glass walls, everything too expensive to touch. There were no family photos, no warmth, not even a hint of laughter. Only echoes. A maid named Clara showed me to my room. Mr. Vale likes order, she said softly, placing my suitcase by the door. Breakfast at 7. Dinner is optional. Don't expect conversation. Her voice was kind, but her eyes were sorry. That night, I stared at the ceiling and whispered the words I'd memorized from the contract. 6 months. No love, no attachment, no questions. It sounded simple enough. I'd lived my whole life following rules, for my father, for survival. What was 6 more months of pretending? But something about the man in the next room made silence heavier than I'd imagined. Days passed in routine. He'd leave before sunrise, return long after dark. Sometimes I'd hear his voice on the phone, calm, distant, commanding. Other times, I'd see him standing by the window, staring at the city lights as if they owed him an apology. We rarely spoke. The first time he addressed me directly was on the 5th day, when I made coffee in the kitchen. You don't have to do that, he said, watching me pour the brew. I wasn't sure if I was allowed to use the machine, I replied, forcing a polite smile. He tilted his head. You're my wife, not the help. The way he said wife made me flinch, not because it was harsh, but because it didn't sound real. I'm not sure what I am, I said quietly. He looked at me for a second too long, then took the coffee I made and left without another word. That was the first moment he broke his rule, speaking to me like a person, not a clause in a contract. By the second week, I'd begun to notice the smallest cracks in his armor. He wasn't cruel, just careful. Every gesture, every word measured as if emotions were liabilities he couldn't afford. One evening, the rain refused to stop. I stood by the balcony, watching the city disappear into mist, when he entered the room. He had just returned from a meeting, coat soaked, tie loosened, exhaustion written across his face. You'll catch a cold, he said. I turned. You sound like you care. He didn't smile. You're under contract. I'm not paying hospital bills on top of this. His sarcasm was sharp, but I caught the faintest glimmer of something softer beneath it. Concern, maybe. Or guilt. Then I'll add it to my list of debts, I murmured. Don't, he said suddenly. You don't owe me anything. He walked away before I could ask why his voice cracked when he said it. On the 12th day, I found him in the kitchen again. He was making coffee this time, his sleeves rolled up, hair a little messy, human for once. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Storms keep me awake. They used to keep me calm, he said. Now they just sound like people arguing. I smiled faintly. Maybe that's what rain is, the sky apologizing. He paused mid-stir, looking at me like he wasn't used to being spoken to gently. You always talk like that? Like what? Like you believe the world can still be kind. Maybe I have to, I said. If I stopped believing that, I'd be just like you. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe, or recognition. And what's wrong with being like me? You've forgotten how to feel, I said. He didn't answer. He just stared at the rain, then whispered, maybe I had to. By the 14th day, the distance between us began to shift. Not closer, just less hostile. He'd leave his coffee cup for me to find. He'd ask if I needed the driver. He even started saying good morning, words that felt foreign in his mouth, like they had to relearn their meaning. I caught him watching me once while I watered the plants his late mother had left behind. He didn't say anything, but his gaze lingered. "What?" I asked. He blinked, startled. "You're keeping them alive." "They were dying," I said. "All they needed was light." He smiled faintly. "You sound like you're talking about people." "Maybe I am." He turned away, but not before I saw it, the tiniest crack in his cold facade. That night, I found a cup of coffee waiting for me at the counter, exactly how I liked it, 2 sugars, no cream. No note. Just warmth. It was the smallest thing, but in a house that had never known kindness, it felt like rebellion. I sat there for a long time, staring at that cup, wondering when pretending stopped feeling like a lie. Because the truth was, I'd started waiting for his footsteps in the hallway. For his voice behind the door. For anything that proved he was real and not just a shadow in a suit. And when I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of him calling my name, not as a contract, but as a confession. On the 15th day, he broke another rule. He said my name out loud. "Leah," he murmured, almost to himself, as if testing how it felt. I froze. We were standing in the elevator, alone, heading down to another public event for his company. "You said we'd keep things professional," I whispered. "I'm aware," he said, eyes fixed ahead. "But I needed to see how it sounded." "And?" His jaw tightened. "Too good for something temporary." The doors opened before I could respond. Cameras flashed. Hands waved. The crowd cheered for a couple that didn't exist. He placed a hand on my back, gentle, protective, dangerously human. And that was how he broke the rule in week 2. He touched me like it meant something. That night, long after the photographers disappeared and the applause died down, I stood in front of the mirror, staring at the ring I'd promised not to care about. He knocked once before entering. "You shouldn't walk alone at these events," he said. "Why? Someone might recognize I don't belong here?" He met my reflection in the mirror. "You belong more than half the people in that room." I turned, startled. "Why would you say that?" "Because you still know what honesty looks like," he said quietly. And I forgot. For the first time, he smiled, not the cold one he used for the world, but something small, unguarded. And just like that, I forgot how to breathe. The next morning, I found the contract on my desk, the same papers we'd both signed weeks ago. One line was underlined in red ink, no emotional involvement. Beside it, a single note in his handwriting. "We're already breaking it, aren't we?" I didn't know if it was a warning or a confession. But either way, it was too late. Because by the end of week 2, I was already falling, and so was he. He signed the contract to protect his heart, I signed it to pay for my father's mistakes. 6 months, no love, no attachment, no questions, a cage drawn neatly in black ink where vows should have lived. We stood in a courthouse that smelled of wet coats and old paper, and when the clerk asked if we understood the terms, he said yes like a man confirming delivery, not promising a life. I wore a borrowed dress and the kind of composure you learn when banks start calling you by your first name. He wore a suit that fit like certainty. We did not hold hands. We did not kiss. When it was done, he nodded once toward the door and said, "The car is waiting," as if we had not just signed our names to the same piece of time. People imagine that money makes a moment shine. It doesn't. It just makes the silence more expensive. I watched his profile in the car window while the city slid by in duplicate, buildings and their reflections, and told myself that this arrangement would be easier than the kind of love that leaves teeth marks. 6 months. Rent paid. Debts erased. A new start. I would be the kind of wife who takes up no space, and he would be the kind of husband who never asks how my day went. We would be clean and contained and forgettable to one another. The problem with promises like that is how quickly a small kindness turns them into lies. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss the upcoming stories. For the next video, what kind of story do you love the most? Tell me in the comments speech balloon. The penthouse looked like money had been given a geometry set. White marble, black glass, stainless steel that held its breath. It wasn't a home, it was a showroom renting itself to our lives. A housekeeper named Mrs. Evans greeted me with warm eyes and careful hands. "Your suite is down the East Hall," she said, lowering her voice as if the architecture might be listening. "Mr. Vale values order. Breakfast at 7. He prefers quiet in the morning." "Good," I said, because quiet is cheaper than conversation. On the desk in my room lay a folder thicker than a wedding album. The first page held the rules in his handwriting, straight, steady, unkind only because it kept its distance. 1. Shared address, separate rooms. 2. No physical affection in private or public. 3. No personal questions. 4. Divorce will be executed on day 180. Below the list, an unnumbered line, lighter ink as if he wrote it after the pen had begun to run out. Don't fall in love. I laughed because I believed it would be the easiest promise to keep. I put the folder back in the drawer and set my phone's calendar to count like a metronome for endurance. Day 1/180. My father called that night and cried the way proud men do, quietly, as if someone might find them for being human. "You sure you're all right, Leah?" "I'm sure," I lied. "I'll send the receipt when the debts are cleared." "I never wanted this," he said. "I never wanted algebra," I said, trying to turn pain into humor, but here we are. Adrian didn't come home for dinner. A tray arrived at my door with a note in a tidy, unfamiliar script. "Welcome, Mrs. Vale. Please ring if you need anything." No one had ever added Mrs. to my name before. It felt borrowed, like the dress, like the future. On day 3, I met Adrian in the kitchen at 6:58 a.m. because rules, I'd learned, were spaces he filled with precision. He stood by the coffee machine like a figure in a painting titled Man with Stainless Steel. His sleeves were already rolled to the forearms, wristwatch catching the morning. "You don't have to wake early," he said, not looking at me. "You do," I said. "It's efficient if we don't collide." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost a flinch. "Efficiency is sacred," he said dryly. "And quiet," I added. "And quiet," he agreed. We drank our separate coffees like two neighboring countries pretending the border was a river and not a line somebody drew once. When he left, the room exhaled. By day 5, I had mapped his movements like bus routes. He left at 7:12, returned at 9:03, ate little, slept less. The city papers printed photographs of us at the courthouse with captions that used words like sudden and strategic. I learned which of his ties meant board meeting and which meant press call, which of his silences meant don't ask and which hid the sound of glass shifting somewhere too far inside him to rescue. We were polite strangers with rings on. It worked, until it didn't. Rain came on day 7 and refused to leave. It made the windows into mirrors you could drown in. I stood at the glass watching the skyline blur, when his reflection arrived behind mine wearing a storm for a suit. He set a file down, removed his jacket, and knotted his tie the way some men pray. "You'll catch a cold," he said, as if the city were contagious through glass. "You sound like you care," I said, because I was tired of pretending every sentence did not cost me something. He didn't smile. "You're under contract." "I prefer not to include hospital paperwork in the terms." "Then I'll add it to my list of debts," I murmured. "Don't," he said softly, surprising us both. "You don't owe me anything." He left before I could ask what went wrong in his life to make him say that like an ache. On day 8, Mrs. Evans showed me the plants in the sunroom, a little forest of things that had no business thriving in a room this cold. "His mother's," she said. She tended them before the illness. Leaves brushed my wrist like small apologies. I watered them the way I wish someone had watered me. Adrian found me there on day 9, kneeling to tug dead threads from a fern. He watched for a moment, indecipherable, then said, "You're good with things that require patience." "I wait well," I said. "It's an inherited skill." "And faith?" "That I pay in installments." Understandable, he said, and for the first time, the word sounded like an offering, not a verdict. We began to share space like people learning a language from opposite ends of the dictionary. He left his tie in the kitchen one morning and did not return for it. I folded it and placed it on the chair outside his room with a note that said simply, "Blue suits you best when you're tired." He wrote back, "Duly noted." The next day he wore blue. On day 10, we attended a charity gala together because the Valles believed in philanthropy the way cathedrals believe in stained glass. A PR woman handed me a script for my face, "Smile like you're in love, Mrs. Vale." I imagined writing my own script, "Smile like the roof stays over your father's head." Cameras flashed. Adrian placed his hand on my back in a gesture that was choreography more than consent, except he hesitated a breath longer than the page demanded. We sat at the front table while a string quartet tried to teach money about grace. When applause came for someone else's generosity, he leaned toward me, a small distance, a large risk, and said, "You're shaking." "So are you," I said. "Perhaps we have that in common," he answered, and then straightened, the wall falling back into place. On day 11, insomnia camped in the rooms between us. At 2:17 a.m., I found him in the kitchen again, unshaven, hair a little disobedient, pouring coffee like it might confess something if cornered. "Can't sleep?" he asked without turning. "Storms make me listen too hard." "To what?" "The part of the night where people don't pretend," I said. He handed me a mug. The steam said, "Be careful." "What do you hear?" he asked. "Footsteps that don't know whether to keep going," I said, pointing at the hall with my chin. He stared at the hallway for a beat that felt like a year. "Sometimes the hardest thing to do is stay," he said. "Sometimes it's the only honest thing." "Which one is this?" I asked. "The night where we admit the contract is easier than the truth." "What's the truth?" He set his cup down with a click. "That if this weren't a contract, I'd ask you about the books on your nightstand." "And I'd lie," I said, rattled, "and say I read something smart." "And I'd laugh," he said, "and ask what you really read." "And I'd say poetry. Because it explains things that explanations can't." He smiled into his cup like maybe some part of him remembered what that felt like. "That's inconvenient. Poetry often is." On day 12, he came home early. He found me on the balcony daring the wind to admit it needed me. The city was still a wet mouth singing. He leaned on the railing beside me, not touching, but near enough for warmth to consider crossing the border. "When I was a child," he said, "I thought rain was the sky practicing forgiveness." "What is it now?" I asked. "A test," he said. "To see who shows up soaked and stays anyway." We stood, soaked and not leaving. His shoulder almost brushed mine. Almost was the rule. On day 13, the tabloids printed us walking out of a museum as if art made marriage believable. The photograph caught something real by accident, his head bowed toward mine in a question, my mouth half open trying not to answer. The caption said, "Newlyweds in love." I wanted to write under it, "Not love. Not yet." I cut the picture out anyway and hid it in a drawer like contraband hope. He noticed my hands were cold in every lobby. He began to offer his gloves without a word, leaving them on the console table with my keys, like a kindness he didn't want credit for. I began to leave him small, unthreatening reminders that he was human, a single chamomile tea bag on his desk after midnight, a sticky note on his laptop that said, "Eat something that wasn't made angry." He rolled his eyes. He ate anyway. By day 14, our silence had learned to speak, and then he broke it with my name. It happened in the elevator on the way down to another room full of portraits and promises. Just us, mirrored paneling multiplying our mistakes. He was adjusting his cuff, not looking up. "Leah," he said, quietly, like a man approaching a sleeping animal. I looked at the brass numbers. "We said no names." "I wrote that rule," he said. "I'm revising it." "Why?" He met my eyes in the reflection, not directly, safer that way. "Because rules that prevent decency are bad rules." "Decency?" I said, too softly. Calling a person by the thing that belongs to them, he said. Even if it's only for a minute in a metal box. The doors opened, saving us. Photographers stood with cameras lifted like weapons that shoot praise and ruin. He placed a hand at the small of my back, the choreography again, but his palm was warm and stayed an extra heartbeat. That was the moment the contract lost its balance. Not a kiss. Not a confession. A touch that ignored Clause 2 and everything it had been designed to prevent, the invention of tenderness. We performed well. My cheeks learned the weight of smiling. His jaw learned the ache of pretending he was not pretending. When the speeches began, he leaned to whisper directions the way you guide an airplane through weather. His breath moved a curl near my ear and I forgot how sentences worked. The world did not end. It changed color. After the event, the car swallowed us and the city tried to act like it hadn't just watched us experiment with something dangerous. He didn't speak until we reached the building. In the elevator, he pressed the button for our floor, then pressed stop between 12 and 13 as if he needed the machine to give us a small unscheduled life. Leah, he said again, a deliberate risk. Yes. This, he gestured to the air between our bodies. He's a man who could buy bridges, still, he couldn't afford that sentence. We should be careful. We have a contract, I said, though my voice had gone somewhere else to blush. We have time, he corrected. And time likes to negotiate. He hit start. We rose. Later that night, when the penthouse went quiet the way snow goes quiet, I found a copy of the contract on my desk with a red line under no emotional involvement and, beside it, 5 words in his careful hand, "We're already breaking it, aren't we?" I didn't answer in ink. I answered by standing in the doorway of his office with a ridiculous, brave cup of chamomile and saying, "You forgot dinner." He glanced up, I surprised because surprise had abandoned him years ago. Was that an invitation? It's a reprimand, I said, and placed the cup on his desk. He looked at the steam like it might scald his old boundaries. Thank you, he said, and it landed like something sacred. On day 15, he arrived at 6:53 a.m., 7 minutes earlier than his routine allowed, and found me in the kitchen because Hope gets up indecently early. He stood too close to the sugar jar by accident. I reached for it. Our hands touched. Neither of us moved for exactly 1 second longer than 2 sensible people should. He withdrew first, as if burned, then laughed at himself with a sound that hadn't seen daylight in a long time. Dangerous, he said. Sugar is, I answered. We will be careful, he said, and then added, lower, and honest. What does honest look like here? I asked. Like telling you I noticed you kept my mother's lilies alive, he said, voice thinner than I'd heard it. They haven't bloomed in years. They're stubborn, I said. They want a reason. What kind? The kind that arrives with a cup of tea at 2 a.m., I said. The kind that remembers your gloves. He stared at the counter instead of me. Then maybe we are giving them one. On day 16, the boardroom tried to eat him. I knew because he texted Mrs. Evans to say he'd be late, and Mrs. Evans, who had watched 2 generations of Vala's mistake endurance for goodness, texted me, please leave something on his desk that isn't work. I left a small orange because it looked like a sun you could peel. He sent a single message at 1:13 a.m., it helped. Thank you. By the end of week 2, our lives looked the same to the outside world, expensive, organized, unloved. Inside, a different weather system had chosen us. He said my name in rooms where he'd promised not to. He touched my back as if gravity had finally allowed it. He broke the rule by learning the temperature of my hands, the pitch of my laugh when I forgot that sound belonged to me. On day 14, hours after the gala, I stood at the mirror removing the last of the evening, the makeup, the posture, the lies. The reflection behind me arrived without a knock. He didn't come inside, he stayed in the doorway like a man auditioning for permission. You shouldn't walk alone at those things, he said. Someone might guess I don't belong, I said, wiping my mouth back to its original shape. You belong more than half the men who think they own the room. I turned. Why would you say that? Because you look at people, not at their names, he answered simply. And because you keep the living things alive. He left before I could find a place to put that. By the time I closed my eyes that night, I knew two things I hadn't planned on knowing: the shape of his tenderness when he wasn't being watched, and the sound my heart makes when a contract becomes a question. I stared at the ceiling, counting backward from 180, and felt the numbers misbehave. Between day 1 and day 14, the line we drew had learned the art of bending. It would break, I suspected, on a morning neither of us could afford to be human. And when it did, the cost would be more than money. For now, I did the only honest thing left to do under the circumstances we had purchased. I slept with my door cracked an inch wider than the rule allowed and told myself it was for the cat we didn't have. On the other side of the wall, a man who had signed away 6 months to keep his heart quiet lay awake learning a truth he had spent years paying to avoid. We were falling out of compliance. We were becoming the kind of story contracts are written to prevent. He said my name again the next morning, not quietly this time, but like a word he was testing for weight. Leah. It rolled through the kitchen like steam. He stood by the window in a shirt that wasn't crisp yet, sleeves folded back, eyes somewhere between resolve and surrender. Good morning, I said, keeping my distance. The contract sat between us like another piece of furniture. You're up early. I didn't sleep, he said. I was thinking about the clauses. I smiled a little. You mean the ones we already broke? He didn't laugh. Maybe they needed breaking. Rules aren't meant to be rewritten, I said. Neither are people, he replied. But they change anyway. He turned away before I could answer. The day moved on, indifferent to us, but the air carried a new kind of silence, one that hummed instead of echoed. That afternoon he invited me to a company dinner. It wasn't in the contract, but saying no would have looked like rebellion. The hall was carved from crystal and ambition. He stood close enough that his cologne made breathing something you had to remember to do. Cameras flashed, the press wanted affection. I wanted to survive the night. Halfway through, someone asked about the honeymoon we never took. Adrian smiled the way businessmen smile when closing a deal. We plan to travel when the timing's right, he said. I stared at the glass in my hand. Maybe somewhere quiet, I added, surprising both of us. He looked at me then, genuinely. Yes, he said softly, somewhere quiet. We made it through dinner without exposing the truth. Only later, when we returned to the car, he whispered, "You're getting too good at pretending." So are you, I said. Maybe that's the danger. He reached for my hand but stopped halfway, fingers curling into a fist. I saw the hesitation, the fear of what one touch could cost. I'll follow the contract, he said, voice low, as if promising it would save him. But neither of us did. By week 3, we started eating breakfast together. Not because it was romantic, but because routine had turned into gravity. He asked about my father, about the books I left half-read. I asked about the company, about the mother whose garden I kept alive. The questions felt like contraband, but the answers sounded like home. Sometimes he'd leave notes on napkins. You forgot your sugar. I'd reply, you forgot your walls. One evening, he found me crying in the laundry room, trying to iron a shirt that wasn't mine. My father had fallen ill again, the doctor's call had come like a knife. I hid my face, but Adrian knelt beside me anyway. What happened? He asked. My father's heart, it's worse. He took the iron from my hand, unplugged it, and placed his palm over mine. You should have told me. It's not your problem, I whispered. You're my wife. By contract, I said. His grip tightened. That's the worst lie I've ever heard you tell. He helped me pack, booked the flight, cleared my schedule. I spent 3 days in my hometown, watching my father sleep in a hospital bed that smelled of antiseptic and regret. When I returned, Adrian was waiting at the airport, no driver, no assistant, just him. Did you eat? Was the first thing he said. That was how I knew I was in trouble. We didn't talk about what we were anymore. We just existed, in shared silences, in overlapping routines, in the kind of tension that couldn't survive witnesses. His laughter became rarer but easier. My fear became quieter. Then came day 60, and the lawyer called to confirm that the halfway review would be due soon. "Mr. Vale, shall we proceed with the standard renewal clause?" Adrian's eyes met mine. He said, "Not yet." After the call, I asked, "You're extending it? Do you want to leave?" I hesitated. "I don't know what I want." He smiled sadly. "That makes two of us." But happiness, even the kind that grows by accident, has a way of being noticed. His father called a week later, voice heavy with warning. "Your personal life is bleeding into your work, Adrian. Keep it clean. End it soon." I didn't hear the rest of the conversation, only the aftermath, the slammed door, the tremor in his voice when he finally spoke to me. "They think you're a distraction," he said. "I am," I said, though it hurt to agree. He stepped closer. "You're the only thing that makes sense." "Then why do you look like you're already saying goodbye?" "Because I might have to." The sentence landed like thunder without rain. He left before I could learn whether it was a warning or an apology. Days passed without him. Silence grew vines over everything. I found myself counting backwards again, not to 180, but to when things still felt safe. I read the contract once more, tracing the ink of his signature. It looked steadier than either of us really was. On day 120, the tabloids struck again, pictures of him at a meeting with his ex-fiancée. The headlines screamed betrayal. I didn't want to believe it, but the photos didn't care. He came home late that night. "You've seen it," he said, not as a question. "Yes. It's business. It looks like history." "History doesn't matter." "Then why does it still hurt?" He had no answer. Only silence and guilt and rain beginning again outside. By morning, he was gone, not vanished, just absent in a way that made the air heavier. The staff told me he'd taken a trip to the Vale estate. "Personal reasons," the assistant said. I packed a bag. Logic said stay. Love, the rule we never should have written, said otherwise. When I arrived, the mansion was quiet except for the piano. He sat there, sleeves rolled up, playing something that wasn't quite music, wasn't quite pain. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Then tell me to leave," I said. He didn't. Instead, he whispered, "I don't know how to stop wanting you." The confession cracked something open between us. We both knew it was the end of pretending. He stood. "If I kiss you now, I'll break everything we agreed to." "If you don't, you'll break me," I said. He crossed the room in 2 steps. The kiss wasn't fireworks, it was surrender, quiet and trembling, 2 people signing their names on the same breath. The next morning, I found the contract on his desk again, a new one, and signed. At the top, written in his hand, "For when rules stop making sense." I left the pen uncapped beside it. 2 months later, my father recovered. The debts were gone. The tabloids had moved on. Only the 2 of us remained, trapped somewhere between fiction and truth. On day 179, I woke to find him sitting at the edge of the bed, the old folder in his lap. "It ends tomorrow," he said. "I know. Do you want it to?" I wanted to say no. But fear is louder than love. Yes, I lied. He nodded slowly. "Then thank you for saving me from myself." He stood, kissed my forehead once, and left the room. Day 180 arrived without ceremony. The lawyers filed the papers. The ring came off my hand like a bandage that had healed nothing. For a week, I didn't hear from him. Then, one night, an envelope slid under my door, no return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You were right. Rules can't save anyone. Love can. If you still believe in storms that grow flowers, meet me where they bloom." I found him in the old sunroom, standing beside the lilies I'd once revived. They were in full bloom now, defiant, golden, alive. He turned when I entered. "You kept your promise," he said. "So did you," I whispered. He smiled, softer than the day we met. Then maybe the contract was never about time. Maybe it was about learning how to feel again. I walked toward him. The rain started outside, gentle this time, not angry, not testing. When he took my hand, I didn't think of ink or signatures or rules. I thought of all the mornings that began with coffee and ended with silence too loud to name. We stood beneath the glow of a storm forgiving itself, and for the first time, we didn't count the days. We let them go. Because love, the one clause we never meant to write, had already rewritten everything.